I want to talk a little bit about the Boston Beer Company side of things, only because when you go there and you get introduced to this whole idea of marketing and compliance, I don't really know what sort of, is there government regulations that are involved with this? Because at some point you could no longer do cigarette commercials on TV, but you can do alcohol commercials. Things change, they always advance. But at the same exact time, you also see, or should I say, it was Discus. I was thinking of Discus because they put forth some guidelines on how people should have more, I guess, truth in marketing, or is it something like that? How do the government regulations and Discus play into what you're trying to do?
Yeah, so it plays a big part, and one of the trickiest parts of alcohol regulation and trying to navigate your way through, generally in marketing, but specifically for social media, is honestly trying to navigate, quite frankly, all of the different regulators out there. So social media, for example, or social influencers and marketing for alcohol in general is actually governed by several different layers, which is unique to the alcohol beverage industry. So you have, on a federal level, most alcohol falls under the jurisdiction of the TTB. Now, the TTB governs most categories of product, but there's some things like hard seltzers that are sugar-based products that actually fall under the FDA. What complicates this is there are two very distinct government bodies that have different rules that apply to like products. So sometimes it's very difficult when you're out in the market, you see two similar products to figure out, A, who is even regulating or has jurisdiction over this from a marketing perspective. From a social media perspective, one of the other things to consider is the FTC is really the agency that governs social influencers and social media the closest. But alcohol in general, outside of that, is also a self-governed advertising body. So there are, like Discus and the Wine Institute and the Brewers Association, all of those organizations put out advertising codes that the industry members abide by. And these codes are really basic. So they provide kind of the fundamentals of marketing alcohol beverages. Discus has actually provided both those kind of fundamental core advertising code regulations, but also went a step further and provide basically a code specifically for social media and social influencers, which is extremely helpful. And it nods to the FTC regulations. So by inherently understanding and knowing what Discus regulates, or what the Discus code provides, you're inherently kind of already following the FTC and the TTB and the FDA guidelines on the subject. Some of the trickier parts is alcohol is also regulated very heavily from a state perspective. So just because you're compliant on the federal level doesn't mean you're 100% necessarily compliant from a state perspective. And most states, their alcohol regulations look very, very different. Each state has its own control board that regulates alcohol, from a labeling perspective to marketing and a distribution perspective. And each state is different. So you have literally 50 different sets of laws that govern something. So if you're nationally distributed or even distributed in a few states, sometimes it's really tricky to navigate. Okay, you know what to do on a federal level, but you have the onus to make sure that you understand what you can do is permissible in the state as well. So kind of that web is honestly, that's a long way of kind of walking you through the general regulatory landscape of alcohol advertising, but it's complicated to say the least. And, there's other important considerations like class action lawsuits and, some other things that aren't necessarily regulatory bodies, but things that you should be generally aware of, which is not meant to scare you, but just, provide information for you to really understand that it's really multiple layers of regulation on alcohol in general.